are joining just now, and welcome everyone. It's 4 p.m. my time, 10 a.m. Jessica's time, so we are ready to start our webinar today on sustainability. And sustainability is quite a broad topic in retail, but today we will speak especially on how RFID can support your journey as a retailer to become more sustainable. And before we start, we would quickly like to introduce ourselves. First of all, I'm Steffi Broere. I'm the Global Customer Success Manager of NEDAP, which means that I want to make sure that our customers can use our RFID solution in the best way possible and get the most out of our RFID solution. And I'm joined today by Jessica. And Jessica, can you also give a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure thing. Thank you, Steffi. Yeah, my name is Jessica St. John, and I'm a project manager focusing on deployments in the United States. And I'm going to be the RFID expert on sustainability today.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And as you may notice, we are both from NEDAP Retail. And NEDAP Retail is a global leader in RFID in the retail industry. So we want to share the knowledge that we have with you today because we think there's a lot of value in RFID in the retail industry, and the only way to make use of that value is to know how to use it. So today we'll do a deep dive into sustainability, and especially now we think it's very valuable information for you, especially in light of the crisis we're in today, to make better use of RFID technologies in your business. And before we really start diving into the content of today, we have some quick house rules. First of all, this webinar will take about 20 to 25 minutes, after which there will be time for a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout this webinar, you can ask them in the Q&A section that you can find at the bottom, or for some of you at the top of your screen. You see a little box of Q&A. If you have any question, fill it out there so that we can answer the questions later. Throughout this webinar, there will also be some polls popping up on your screen. And if you see the poll, please feel free to answer it with the answer that's most applicable to your situation so that we can see a little bit of how you're feeling about certain statements as well. And also important to know is that this webinar will be recorded. So if you want to share it with some other colleagues, or if you want to look back at it again at another point in time, we will send you the recording. It will be on our website. And you can also share it with your colleagues via that. And of course, if you like this webinar, it's a webinar out of a series. And if you like this webinar, we also recommend you to watch previous recordings. And also, of course, feel free to like and share these webinars on our social medias and with your colleagues directly. And with that being said, I think it's good to look into what we will learn today. First, we will dive into what sustainability really means and what trends we see when it comes to sustainability in retail. After that, Jessica will explain how sustainability equals profitability. And then we will look at how RFID can really support sustainability. We will look into 3 topics mainly. First, reducing supply chain waste, then supply chain transparency, and we will have a few other use cases. And lastly, we will talk about the environmental impact of RFID labels. And with that, I would like to hand over to Jessica to really explain what we mean by sustainability.
Thank you, Steffi. Yeah, so to start out with, we hear the word sustainability being used a lot nowadays, but what actually does it mean? So we'll start off with the definition of it. Sustainability focuses on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And a common framework for understanding and approaching sustainability is the triple bottom line, which is composed of 3 individual pillars. And these pillars are economic, environmental, and social. And this is known more informally as the 3 Ps, or the people, planet, profit model. The sustainability discussion in retail hits on all 3 of these pillars in different ways. And the information today that we're going to cover is quite broad. It touches on all 3 of those pillars, but it's going to mostly focus on stock accuracy, enabling overstock reduction, supply chain transparency, and the environmental impact of labels. So sustainability has been a trend for a long time now, and it's been steadily increasing in importance for quite some time due to increasing awareness around carbon emissions, clothing ending up in landfills, and workers' rights issues. Awareness around these have driven consumer demand for brands which value sustainability. And we now see that trend amplifying due to COVID. Of course, it's impossible to say exactly how retail will change in the wake of COVID-19, but it has definitely created an opportunity for reflection and change in the industry. And while some sustainability initiatives may be delayed as stores focus on reopening, it seems likely that certain aspects of sustainability may become more important in the long term, especially the ones that relate to future-proofing companies. So it appears that consumers are valuing sustainability even more in the wake of COVID. It says that 2/3 consumers state sustainability has become more important to combat climate change after COVID-19. Another trend that has to do with sustainability, but just business in general, is also resiliency. And that's come into the spotlight due to COVID. Focus on making business models more resilient to weather future crises, whether it's a pandemic or climate change. Supply chains being reevaluated in an environment of ever-decreasing resources and increased financial pressure are encouraging lean and demand-driven business models. So we see that 76% of the international sourcing community foresee an acceleration and decreasing inventory levels. So this is taking a step back, changing an industry-wide practice of overproduction, which has now become a key focus point in the drive for sustainability and resiliency. So this increasing demand from consumers and governmental regulations has caused industry leaders to pursue industry-wide sustainability initiatives. And we see that these are gaining some widespread support. One of those is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which basically coined the term circular economy, which speaks to the circularity of products and their life cycle. And we see many key members are joining the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and speaking to circularity and their sustainability initiatives. And some of those include Gap, Burberry, H&M, Inditex, PVH, and many more. Another industry-wide initiative is the HIG Index, which is supported by the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which this is basically a suite of tools enabling the apparel industry to accurately measure and score a company or product sustainability performance. And they have many retailers utilizing that suite of tools as well. Another large and all-encompassing movement has been the UN Fashion Industry Charter for Climate Action, which set the vision to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. This was launched in December of 2018 and has many signatories, including Decathlon, Adidas, Target, Puma, Nike, and many more. So another trend that we are seeing with retailers and their commitment to sustainability is that they are setting quantitative and ambitious sustainability targets, often around CO2 emission reduction and generating zero waste, for example. PVH, for example, said that their ambition is for our products and business operations to generate zero waste, zero carbon emissions, and zero hazardous chemicals, and for our products to be circular. And then they quantified that by saying they set a 30% reduction in supply chain emissions by 2030. So now I'd like to hand it over to Steffi to see what you think about your organization.
Yes, thanks a lot, Jessica. And I think indeed what you already mentioned is that we also see the request of well, how can we become more sustainability, also reflecting back to how RFID can support in that from our customers. And I think we have some interesting insights on that later, how RFID can support. But before we dive into that, I think it's important to ask the question if you think your organization will also prioritize sustainability more in the wake of COVID-19. And we have a couple of answer options for the poll that you should see on your screen right now. Is it yes, a little? Has the focus stayed the same? Has it lessened a little, or has it lessened significantly? We are very curious to see what your experience is from the retailer. Do you see an increase in sustainability, well, prioritization? Is it the same, or maybe has it lessened a little bit? You take a couple more seconds for everyone to fill out the poll that you should all see on your screen right now, and then we will look into the results of today. I still see some answers coming in. And I think I will end the poll right now and share the results. And what we see is quite interesting because most of you say that there is indeed a little bit of an increase in the prioritization of sustainability. And I think we are both quite, well, moderately happy, I would say, to see that, because of course it's an important topic, and it's good to see that it gains some traction also for the retailers. And Jessica, can you maybe dig deeper into why sustainability is so important, not only from an environmental perspective, but also business-wise?
Sure, absolutely. So, just a second. So while sustainability has often been associated with higher cost, there are many aspects of sustainability that are actually synonymous with saving money. And these are the type of initiatives that we will likely come to focus on even more in the months ahead. So the last point about wanting to make businesses lean in order to better weather increased financial pressures caused by crises has brought a heightened awareness to an old issue in retail, which is inventory excess. So managing unsold and excess inventory is more relevant now due to the backup of inventory in warehouses and stores that needs to be managed and optimized. Excess inventory that cannot be sold eventually ends up getting marked down, sent to charities or outlets, or incinerated, or it's sent to landfills. And this has heavy financial and environmental costs, which are incurred when this waste happens at the end of the supply chain. Which is exactly why the the Sourcing Journal has said that sustainability is not a buzzword. It's directly tied to apparel's struggle to be profitable. And to put some numbers behind this to give it some scope, 150 billion garments per year are produced in the retail industry. And roughly 30% of those garments never sell, which creates 92 million tons of textile waste. And this amount of waste equates to massive financial costs, sometimes in the billions for large retailers. So what can be done about this? Well, there's a trend within apparel, but also in the larger sustainability debate, where businesses are turning to technology to help achieve their sustainability targets and make operations more sustainable. And IoT, or RFID, is often one of those top emerging technologies that's being turned to because it can provide so many operational insights. The World Economic Forum identified that 84% of IoT deployments currently address or have potential to address the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And why that's important is because we see those Sustainable Development Goals often being addressed by retailers and their sustainability initiatives. Some of the most popular ones that are that can be approached by or solved by RFID in retail is the SDG number 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure. Also, responsible consumption and production, and climate action. So why exactly is RFID good at helping drive sustainability? It's perfectly situated to contribute to sustainability initiatives due to the item level advanced analytics it enables and the ability of those analytics to drive process innovations. Basically, without accurate data, there's no way to have the insights necessary to optimize operations. And RFID provides this necessary accurate data. And that's why we're seeing data becoming what's said to be retail's new currency. So Steffi, with your experience with customers, what do you think about the potential RFID data has to be leveraged to support sustainable operations?
I think one big use case is that we see that with more accurate stock information, of course, you can have, for example, better demand predictions, but also you prevent overstocks from occurring, which eliminates a lot of waste. But I think you will dig a little bit deeper in that later. And before we do so, we are actually curious to see if you're already considering using this RFID data. Some of you might already use RFID, some of you might be considering RFID in general. The question right now is, have you considered using RFID data to support more sustainable operation? And the answer options are, yes, we already do, yes, we are thinking about it, or no, we are not. And we take a couple more seconds again for everyone to fill out the poll. And then we know a little bit of what, well, our audience is thinking today. I'll take a few more seconds. I see the final answers coming in just now. And I'll end the poll and share the results with you. And this is quite a positive result, I would say, again, because we see that a lot of you are thinking about it or are already using RFID data to support more sustainable operations. And now, of course, for the ones who are already using it, it might be interesting to see which cases you are using, which cases you could also start using. And for the ones who are considering it, yeah, use this as a source of inspiration to where you can really start by looking at data to support sustainable operations. And with that being said, Jessica, I think it's time to dive into how RFID can support sustainable operations.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Steffi. Interesting to see those results. So RFID has the potential to impact waste throughout the supply chain, and it varies as it's multifaceted and occurs at multiple points throughout that supply chain. So on the x-axis, you can see a representation of a typical supply chain here with the factory on the left, the DC in the middle, and the store on the right. And then the headquarters is represented on the very far right. And on the y-axis, we'll look at financial and environmental implications. But first, let's look at how RFID can be applied at each point. So starting with the source, RFID can be used to provide more accurate historical data of stock, which can be useful for forecasting and preventing overproduction. It can also be applied in the manufacturing process to manage machinery, thereby reducing processing time and product loss. This cuts pre-consumer waste, and that's how much pre-consumer waste ends up being incinerated. And if we move to the DC, we see that DC to store allocations also have the potential to benefit from accurate data. So basically, the allocations could be improved by providing insights into regions where products are selling better, and also by lowering the thresholds, which is enabled by stock accuracy. Also, RFID can help in the DC by creating more accurate in and outbound shipments, which prevents inefficiency and waste. And on the store level, we see a great opportunity for impact. Basically, RFID, while it initially might cause extra product to be pushed to the store to account for understocks, over time it's shown that it lowers inventory while still allowing the store to sell more of the right product, but it lowers the inventory by between 2 and 13%. So stock accuracy is really creating this solid foundation for advanced analytics, providing insights into the stock. It also can fuel functionalities to optimize those products while they're in the store and prevent dead stock from occurring, such as functionalities that increase the product's availability. So by having more accurate data around stock in the store, retailers can lower their safety stock and prevent unnecessary waste from occurring. It's also important to mention here that the EPCIS repository also creates a central reservoir of information about each item as it moves throughout the supply chain, which contributes to the ability of those products to be tracked and traced. So now I want to take a second to look at the cost both from a financial and an environmental perspective. And we see that costs are incurred by unnecessary overstocks all the way throughout the supply chain, with some specific costs occurring at every step, such as labor. Other financial costs include the storage, packaging, transportation, production, materials. Increased theft is also shown to happen in stockrooms when it's overstocked. And then, of course, the gross profit margin is diminished by overstocks, and the opportunity cost of tied up capital also happens due to overstocks. So the words that have a little leaf next to them also incur environmental cost. So if we look at production, by producing unnecessary stock, extra electricity, water, and dye pollution occurs. Extra materials are used, such as pre-consumer waste and overproduction, thereby using natural resources. When the products become packaged and shipped, packaging materials use natural resources and contribute to pollution, as well as the CO2 emissions incurred during transportation. And then at the very end, at the store point, at the point of the store, when the product, if it doesn't sell, then the product needs to be disposed of, either shipped somewhere else or disposed of, which also has environmental implications. And for the sake of completeness, it's also important to mention returns. In our ever-increasing omnichannel world, returns have become more important than ever. And there may also be potential to apply RFID at the point of returns, as currently quite a bit of waste is being generated there. So if we step back and look at the supply chain, we see that the more RFID data is increased throughout the supply chain and is applied in a more real-time way, the greater the potential is for financial and environmental savings. So now I want to dive into this concept a little bit deeper and talk about overstocks. So traditionally, we have looked at preventing out of stocks with RFID to prevent lost sales. But RFID can bring accuracy not only to understocks, but also overstocks. And that accuracy prevents replenishing items that are actually above the replenishment threshold, but which the ERP system thinks is below, which in turn prevents unnecessary excess safety stock from entering the store and thereby improving allocation. And I found this particularly interesting on a personal level because as a project manager actively involved with deployments, I've spent a fair amount of time in stock rooms of retailers and was shocked early on at how stocked back of houses can be, oftentimes with products that maybe aren't seasonally relevant or aren't moving. And I realize that this is a repeated and widespread occurrence that many retailers face. And luckily, RFID has the potential to unlock some improvements in this arena. So what can RFID do concerning overstocks? It can basically help prevent, optimize, and identify what those overstocks are. So speaking of prevention, which is the best because then the product is unnecessary safety stock isn't made in the first place, which has the most savings. That can happen due to stock accuracy caused by RFID. Also, supply chain transparency helps with this. But what about overstocks that already exist? Well, increasing the product availability and using functionalities that are fueled by RFID can help optimize product by making it available at the right time in the right place so that it has more of a chance of being sold. And identifying the overstocks is, of course, very important. And that can be done through advanced analytics and extra data. So we've seen a retailer who built in a 10% safety stock reduction into their business case for RFID. And that has some environmental savings, such as percent reduction of raw materials, natural resources, and emissions. But for them in particular, it also correlated with a savings of $54 million. So of course, building in some safety stock is an accepted way of operating and a choice because it guards against out of stocks, which would frustrate the customer and prevent sales. But RFID brings heightened awareness to the difference between the intended built-in buffer and the extra buffer that unknowingly exists due to data inaccuracy. And this is how RFID basically reduces unnecessary safety stocks and eliminates them. So now we're going to turn to a separate application of RFID in retail sustainability, which has to do with both a social and an environmental component, which is supply chain transparency. And we see that this is definitely trending upwards in importance for retailers. So what is transparency and traceability when it comes to talking about supply chains? Transparency is the visibility and accessibility of information to provide insights to end users so they can make more environmentally and socially informed decisions. Traceability is then proving that that information that the end user gets is actually accurate. So conscious consumers have began demanding something called radical transparency, which this has made the old practice where retailers would provide a supplier list on the company's corporate social responsibility section of the website. Basically, it's made that inadequate as the consumers want answers to more questions and they want access to that information at the point of sale where it's easy for them to make that decision. So what type of information are these customers wanting? They're wanting to know the production country. They're wanting to know the supplier name, the factory names and addresses, number of workers in the factories, materials used to make the garment, as well as the ecological footprint of products. So what is the trend with this supply chain transparency? We're seeing that 59% of sourcing executives expect to see an increase in the level of information on suppliers at the point of sale. And 65% expect to achieve full traceability from fiber to store by 2025. And it's pretty widespread. There's a widespread agreement that within retail that they want to do this. The question then becomes, okay, how? And while several different technologies can be employed to do this, RFID is definitely in the lead. 13% of retailers already use RFID for traceability, and 58% expect to adopt RFID to achieve traceability in the next 5 years. So now I will hand it back over to Steffi to discuss some other potential use cases of RFID and retail sustainability.
Yes, thanks a lot, Jessica. I think indeed overstocks and accuracy in your stock and both together with transparency are two really big use cases. But we also have spotted some, for now, maybe smaller use cases, but still interesting use cases around retailers that we did research on, but also experienced ourselves. So one example is, for example, providing garment life cycle information. What we notice is that, of course, a lot of items do have a care label that states how to best wash it and best dry it. And with this care label, you can really extend the life cycle of clothing, hence reducing waste. And we also know that about 100% of textiles are actually recyclable, but only 15% generally is recycled. So there's quite a big gap. And with the information in, for example, the care label of an item, you can give, with RFID especially, you can give much more information on how to best use a specific product, as you can simply store more information behind the database of the item you're selling. And another use case is that you can add more information on warranties. So for example, what we see is that for a lot of items, there is a warranty when something is broken or something needs a repair, but a lot of customers simply do not know how to get this information. And by providing this information better via information within the product, you can extend the life cycle of products by 3 months, which reduces about 5 to 10% of waste, simply because customers know that they can repair a certain product, that there is a service for them to provide them with a better life cycle of the product. And another use case is that a trend actually that we see is that more and more companies are looking into digitizing the rental and re-commerce business, which means that in a circular economy, more customers are looking into reselling their products after they've used it, but also more and more brands or retailers start to look into how they can support in this business. And this is expected to only grow, especially in the light of COVID. So what we really see is that by knowing, for example, where a product has been via EPCS repository, you get more data on which product came from a certain store, and you can really support this re-commerce business as a retailer. And although these use cases are a bit smaller compared to the other two use cases Jessica provided, they're still interesting for retailers, as they really help to build this longer life cycle of products and a circular economy better. And it would be a bit ignorant if we would leave out the labels completely in this webinar, because what we see is that, of course, RFID comes with the investment of billions of RFID tags each year. And when I say billions, we found in research, but also from experience, that this adds up to 8 billion tags each year that are very hard to recycle and therefore largely end up in landfills. And of course, this is quite a big pile of labels if you would put that all together. And it's easy to say, well, a label is small and you have to waste anyway, so we just have to deal with it. If there are other options, why not utilize that? And we actually see that there's more and more options coming onto the market for better recyclable or biodegradable and manufactured labels with a lower footprint on our market. So the tag industry is really driven for more sustainable tags. And with that, we see a rise of environmental friendly labels. For example, an example that we have on the slide here, but we also see other label providers that have very big improvements in how the labels used to be. And these improvements mainly come from taking out certain layers of PET or toxic layers from the labels, making the labels much smaller in the light of less is more, and making sure that in the production also the CO2 emissions are lowered significantly. And with that, it's of course important to note that it might be still in some way less sustainable to have these labels, but they are the mean to an end that definitely can make your operation so much more sustainable, because these labels really enable your supply chain efficiencies. And then we end up on our last poll of today, because we are very interested to see how which sustainability topic is most interesting to you as a retailer. Is that the preventing supply chain waste? Is that the eco-friendly labels? Is it supply chain transparency? Or is it another use case that we might have already covered partly today, or another use case that you experienced that we didn't cover? And if so, if you hit other, we are very interesting to hear, maybe via the chat or via the Q&A section. You can inform us which option there still is that we missed, or which option that we did cover you found most interesting. We take a couple more seconds for everyone to fill out this poll. And then I'll share the results with you. And what we see from the results here is that 38% of you is most interested in preventing supply chain waste, but also 46% of you is interested in supply chain transparency, which I think was partly what we expected. We also see this as the two biggest topics, but I'm still interested to hear, Jessica, what do you think of these results?
Yeah, that's a little bit along the lines of what we expected, and interesting to see validated here. I'm also curious from the people the 4% who selected other, what they're investigating and interested in pursuing.
Yeah, indeed. So if you want to share more about that, feel free to do so via the Q&A or via the chat. I also see some questions coming in already. And we are at the end of this webinar, so we will have some time for questions in a bit. But before we move to the questions, I would like to formally end this webinar by thanking you for participating and letting you know that we have a next webinar coming up on Omnichannel and RFID, which will take place the 7th of July at 10 a.m. or 4 p.m. or any other time wherever you are. And this webinar, the recordings of this webinar, but also previous webinars, can be found on our website. So feel free to have a look. We will also send an email as a follow-up where you can find the recordings more easily. And then I want to give a big thank you for Jessica for taking us on this journey on sustainability and RFID.
Thank you, Steffi, and thank you everyone who joined us today.